This machine was my introduction to video games. The Commodore 16. It was released in 1984 by Commodore International, and it was intended as an entry-level computer, a budget alternative to their more famous product of the time, the Commodore 64, that bastion of 8-bit gaming. The Commodore 16 was not that successful, however. In the mid-80s, 16 kilobytes of RAM was already quite a small amount. Things had moved on a lot from the Atari VCS days, and only a year later, in 1985, of course, the Atari ST would hit the market, and now we're in the 16-bit era. That's the new gold standard, and the old 8-bit machines are actually the budget models, which doesn't leave a lot of niche for something even less powerful. Now, that said, the Commodore 16 was not a total failure. It had a particular success in Eastern Europe in the post-communist days. It was many people's first opportunity to own a home computer. And so there were quite a few games made for it, and some programmers were able to get some very excellent results out of it. Names come to mind such as Udo Gertz, Doug Turner, Sean Southern. They got some genuinely impressive results out of the machine, and even in less capable hands, if the graphics and the sound were really impressive, certainly not on a par with the more popular machines of the time, still there were many very playable and enjoyable games for it. But this video is not so much about them. There is the nasty flip side. And one area in which the poor Commodore 16 was very disadvantaged was arcade conversions. After all, this is the mid-80s now, we're moving into the 16-bit era, we've moved on from Pong and Space Invaders, and the Commodore 16, with its lack of hardware sprites and its sad, bleepy little sound chip, was not designed to convert mid-80s arcade machines, but some people did try. I guess there were money in them there hills, and after the poor consumers bought the product and paid for it, and yeah. Caveat emptor, or words to that effect. So, let's look at some of these. Now, Green Beret, otherwise known as Russian Attack, was a popular mid-80s arcade game. This is what it looks like in its proper incarnation, and this is what it looks like on Commodore 16. So, I think we can all agree that's a very bare-bones intro screen. I think the stab to start is inspired by the Spectrum version, which uses the same text. However, yeah, that's not the Spectrum version. Although it is trying to copy some of its assets. The Lives icon is a hammer and sickle, though you'd struggle to make that out in this version. And the sprites, well, they're not really sprites. You could hardly call them that with all that clash. This got a slight resemblance to the Spectrum ones, albeit they're horribly out of proportion, and the animation's terrible, and because there's no distinction between the ones that can shoot and can't shoot, you find yourself just getting shot, and your game ends very quickly. Well, that and the hideous scrolling, which means enemies can just spawn all over the place. Oh dear me. It looks like a basic type-in game, but it's not. It's actually in machine code. I disassembled this one. However, it doesn't seem to have gone to much effort to redefine the character set. You can see Game Over is just surrounded by default asterisks. It's really, really shoddy, and it might give you the impression this is the best the machine could do, but this would not be the case. Because this is where indie studios would come in, or smaller studios anyway, they would come in and they would steal the premise. Plagiarism, I think we call that, but it's hard to be too judgmental in this case, because they would steal it to show that they could do a better job with it. Because, believe it or not, this is the official Imagine release. This is the Hit Squad release of Green Beret. This should have been the best version they could do, but that clearly isn't. And there is a better, albeit unofficial version. So now I introduce you to Bridgehead by Kingsoft. So here's the loading screen, and we can see from that this is a German game, as many of the C16's best games actually were. Got a little helpline number in the corner. And now it starts up and we can see we've got the text fading in and out. The font is redefined. This is quite cinematic by the standards of the time. Even on a Commodore 64 that would have looked quite decent. And the presentation continues. We have a proper title header. We've got a little bitmap of a soldier there. The text's colour cycling, and we have music. None of this may seem that impressive if this had been the first one you'd seen, but I think we can all agree compared to the travesty of an official version, this has obviously had so much more effort put into it. This would not look out of place on a Commodore 64. Now we have the main game graphics. It's pretty basic. We've got a simple color-graded sky. We've got some generic palm trees. Our little soldier fella there, he animates okay. You can see him using his knife. It's got a very tiny attack window, so it's not easy. There's a lot of careful timing involved, but it still feels fairer than in the official version. And at least it doesn't look like you're punching the air. There's a bit of color clash on the ground, but very little on most of the scenery. And you have grenades! You have a secondary weapon, and a projectile weapon at that. Although that's best reserved for getting rid of the mines on the ground. Which, yeah, Green Beret is supposed to have mines on the ground. They don't happen in the official Commodore 16 version. They're part of the, like, 90% of content that's left out. If you get far enough in this game, in Bridgehead, you will find enemies with rocket launchers as well. This is may seem small fry variety nowadays, but back then this is not to be sneezed at. You can collect boxes to replenish your grenades. You can see up in the bar at the top near the score and the lives, which, unlike in Green Beret, is nicely separated into a properly defined HUD rather than just pasted on in generic ASCII text. It's a much slower paced game. You saw 2 soldiers walking past there, but you rarely see more than 2 enemy sprites on screen at a time. Oh, they can climb the ladders and hurt you. That's quite impressive, actually, so you can't take them for granted. But it's still a lot fairer than Green Beret. To be honest, it's fairer than Green Beret in any version, because even if you're playing a good version of Green Beret, it's often considered a game that's too frantic for its own good. I can't get far even in a good conversion of the arcade. Whereas this is much more sedate. Often you can go through screens without even seeing an enemy. But when they come, it's not that easy to kill them, because the knife it requires very careful timing, which can get frustrating, but still, I would so much rather be playing this than the alternative version. Let's move it on a little, just to see some graphical variety. Oh no, let's let it run here just for a bit, because you can see we've got a nice rope bridge in the background there. But let's have a look at level 2 after we've seen that. Okay, moving us on. And we're now in level 2. We have tanks, a watchtower, barbed wire fence, all these metal gantries, and I'm getting killed. Yeah, when you start to lose your timing, you can die quite rapidly, but you've got quite a few lives. It's more generous with its lives again than the official version, which gives you a minuscule 3, which can disappear in an absolute flash. So, it's... I wouldn't call it an 8-bit classic, but this is certainly far, far better than the licensed game. So it goes to show that you could do a lot more with the machine. Oh my gosh, look, the sprites are even displaying behind the fence. Isn't that nice? We've got a bit of foreground there. They've really taken their time to produce something that would be liked, rather than just do a quick cash grab. So, that's Bridgehead. But the sad story, unfortunately, of official conversions does not stop with Green Beret. Remember Commando? Another famous run-and-gun game from the 1980s. This is what it looked like in arcade. You may remember it had a very good conversion on Commodore 64 as well, which had a brilliant soundtrack remix by Rob Hubbard. The C16 owners, alas, were not as lucky. This is what they got. So first impressions aren't too bad. That's a decent looking title screen. But the game, oh dear me. I mean, the graphics aren't terrible for Commodore 16, though they're very choppy, but the gameplay is just depressing. There's no scrolling, so there's no real sense of adventure. You're just trying to clear screens of very generic enemies who just pop up like they're in a game of whack-a-mole. Although you've got these rocket launcher guys for variety. Look at this one. He's going to come out of the opposite side of the screen and ambush you there, just like he was Pac-Man or something. Very realistic war game, and if you're not lucky with your moves at the very beginning, they can just wipe you out like that. It's unfair, and it's unfun. It looks superficially like Commando, I guess, but it's a complete departure from the spirit of that game. It has none of its atmosphere, none of its charm. It's just depressing. Thankfully, there is also an unofficial version of this game. Not by a German company this time. This time it's by Mastertronic, the offshoot of Virgin, who did a lot of budget games for the UK 8-bit scene, especially on the Spectrum and the C64, but they also had a good stable of programmers who could work with the Commodore 16 to get actually playable results. And one of those programmers produced a game called Gunlaw, so let's take a look at that now. Okay, so here we have Gunlaw. Simple but decent title screen, bit of graphics, color cycling text, programmed by Richard Clark. Shows the high score, no music, but there's some fairly decent sound effects when the game starts. And the graphics are much more reminiscent of Commando. Other than the terrible aspect ratio, this is this game's main problem. That and the enemies can't spawn except fully on screen, so with that and this letterbox, usually they're on you very quickly, as you can see. Still, in spite of that making the game insanely difficult, it's a lot more fun than the official Commando, just because it scrolls, and the graphics change and develop a bit, you get more scenery, the enemies aren't just sitting around playing whack-a-mole, they're walking around, you have to try and outmaneuver them. It's just so much closer in spirit to what Commando's supposed to be. There were a couple of other games that were alternatives to Commando. There was one called Legionnaire, which unfortunately I haven't been able to find a good crack of. Every version I can find glitches. And there's a version of Who Dares Wins, but I think that one was pretty awful. But this isn't bad. This is not half bad. It's not great. It's you wouldn't accept it on Commodore 64. Although I can name a few Commodore 64 games that were actually well worse than this. But for what it is, it's certainly a lot more pleasing than the official version, and I believe if you press on further in this one, which would take some doing, you can encounter some force fields and some UFOs, because it goes into slightly science fiction territory, this one. It's not as straightforwardly gritty shoot 'em up as Commando itself is. But it's definitely, it knows what it's ripping off here. And it does a much more creditable job of it than Elite managed with their own version, sadly. So, the last game I want to look at in this vein is Paperboy, another mid-80s coin-op game that was widely converted on many platforms. And they were of wildly varying quality. The C64 version doesn't seem to get a lot of love. I quite like it, to be honest. I thought it wasn't the most accurate conversion, but it captured quite a lot of the zaniness and the pleasure of just chucking the papers at all the scenery and demolishing the windows and the trash cans and everything was delightfully sociopathic. I thought it did a decent job. The Commodore 16 version, on the other hand... Right, we can instantly see this is going to be a very choppy experience. It's got the general look. It's oddly... It's got a bit of the presentation, that's nice, even if it's very blocky. But when the game starts, oh ye gods, just look at that attempt at a player sprite. The clash is unreal again. And the choppiness. Oh, there comes a tire. I think it's supposed to be a tire, you'd struggle to tell. Kind of animated. But... ooh... It's not as bad as Green Beret, few things are. I suppose that's... Is that a Roomba or a lawnmower or something? Papers don't animate at all when you throw them. Suppose that would be too much to ask, but ooh... doesn't sound great either, very crunchy. Ooh... And not much is going on. Paperboy is meant to be quite zany. I say that and we get another Roomba and a tire there. Oh, the clash is just... oh, it's horrible. And there's so much screen tearing at the top as well. And now it's some sort of white blob chasing us there. I'm thinking from the direction it's coming in, that's meant to be a dog. It's probably... they've ripped the sprite from the Commodore 64 version, but they've done a really, really shoddy digitization of it, perhaps. No real death sequence, it just says crash at the top of the screen. Oh dear. Again, the HUD is just standard ASCII text. Bleeding blue all over the wall there. That's a lot less gruesome than I make it sound. Oh... so boring, nothing's happening. I managed to crash into a flower bed, so little was happening in there. The game is now over. So that is an official conversion of Paperboy, and it's pretty lousy. However, true to form, we have an unofficial conversion of Paperboy called Sun Street, another German game. Let's have a look at that. Right. Again, continuing a trend, we have a much better title screen. Sun Street, written and designed by Tom Fresman. And the banner is nice and animated. And we have some music, which is pretty bleepy music, as is standard for the Commodore 16. There's not much helping that. It didn't have the SID chip or anything. But, on the whole, it's not bad. It's certainly a lot better than the absolute lack of any presentation with the previous game. So, let's see what it looks like now. When it starts up, we actually have a newspaper, like in Paperboy. We have a little fake newspaper with a picture and an obituary for someone called Thomas. That's fairly gruesome. That will be a theme as the game goes on. It has a slightly morbid sense of humour. Now it starts, and I'm not going to defend the main sprite because it's very choppy and very flickery. This is not a perfect game by any means. However, just in terms of humour, we can smash the windows again, just like in proper Paperboy. It's very hard to aim the papers, but at least they look more like papers now. They don't animate, but they do look like papers rather than just generic blocks. It's much easier to aim for the door than it is to aim for the post box, but to be honest, I'm struggling to hit anything at the moment. You can only go left and right, you can't go up and down in this version or change speed, at least not that I was able to ascertain. So it's been fairly quiet now, but now as you go on further in the game, hazards start to appear. We start off with these garbage cans, and there's some tin tacks on the side of the street there. You can go on the sidewalk, but only if it's clear of hazards. Broken another window there. house textures have changed, and everything looks very clean and neat and colourful, unlike the vomitous graphics of the official conversion. Little doggy crossing the road up there. It's simple, but at least it looks like a dog, rather than a white blur. We have a line of blind men waving their canes around. Very hard to maneuver in between hazards in this one, though. It's that's the problem with this isometric perspective. The collision detection is pretty ropey. And I've smashed into a car there. Give your Undertaker my best regards. As I said, pretty morbid. It forces you back a bit, unfortunately, when you collide with anything, so yeah. It's hard to make progress. So, back where we were, trying to avoid the car this time. But that's a very tight hazard coming up. Cut. Oh! You should better play marbles. Why do I think this game may have been coded by somebody whose first language wasn't English? Finally! I get a paper through a door there. Because you can, as I mentioned, you can shoot for either the doors or the post box. Frankly, though, the trajectory the papers fly at, you're going to struggle to hit either, and you're going to be spending most of your time avoiding hazards. So, yes, this time I just stay on the far right, which seems to work a lot better for avoiding those cars. It's frustrating, I will admit. It's very frustrating, but oh, I mean, just look at that car. That's lovely. It's so much more visually appealing. I'm not going to have missed that. Yeah, but it's appealing enough that I would dare give it another go. So let's see if I can do any better. Oh, setting off again, Sun Street. We have a nice little street sign there. This is very pleasingly designed. They've got little foundations, very colourful. Bit of a sense of light sourcing on the side. Simple graphics, but they're just appealing. Well, certainly way more appealing than what we saw in the other version. The movement is terribly choppy, though. This was a big problem with the Commodore 16 because it didn't have hardware sprites like the Commodore 64, so everything that resembles a sprite is redefined char set, and often, like on the Sega Master System, of course, which used a lot of redefined char sets, they didn't move very smoothly. You could see that coming. Nice wheelchairs there at St. Mary's. Yeah. Somebody is mocking me. Try and avoid the Tintax. Fail to avoid the Tintax. Have you tried St. Mary's Hospital? Feel this hospital is angling for business. One more go at staying on the sidewalk. Yay! So, yeah, another problem, of course. We have still some clash, some bleed around the sprites. There's an attempt to minimize it, but it's not that successful. And now we're getting reasonably far. Ooh. Oh, nasty. But, you know, this one, much more than the other one, it's got the one more go factor, so let's just try and push on a little bit. I feel like the further I go, the more I learn, to an extent. One thing I don't get any better at is getting these damn papers into these damn houses. They could have made that easier. It's just the way they fly off at that really weird trajectory. Not that it matters, really, because I've never completed a level in this game, and I probably never will. Sidewalk or road? Definitely road, I think. Oh, got the post box there. Back to the... Oh, got the door. And now our little rag of blind man, and staying hard right seem to do best here. So focused on avoiding hazards that I'm often forgetting to even throw the papers. Seems to have infinite papers though, so that's some blessing. Doing quite well apart from that. Avoid the car this time. Ooh. Little go-kart. Yay! And yep, we have a moving car now, which somehow crashed into me. Nice wheelchairs at certain areas. Ooh, the collision detection isn't very fair, I think. It would have been much better if it had been a little more user-friendly. And again, it's like, how do you weave in between those garbage cans? So hard to work out what the safe spot is. Yeah, I'm okay now, apparently. Now can I not get hit by the car this time? I think I'm through. Good. So there's bound to be something on this corner. Nope. Thought there'd be a... Oh no, wait, there's another crossing. And looks like... What is that, a church van? It's a sort of hearse thing? Yeah, it's going slowly, so weave around it. But, you know, it's some variety, and it's definitely graphical variety. There's a different go-kart. It's doing very well for sort of coming up with different things for you to avoid. Little kid running right in front of the car. More blind man. Another go-kart. And a couple of lads holding a pane of glass. That's nice. They're not moving with it, but a whole load of dogs. Like in Paperboy, this gives the impression of a town that's way too zany for its own good. Oh dear. Oh no, it's not run over the dog. I think it hasn't run over the dogs. That would have been fairly tasteless. Oh crap. Can I get through? Oh, go-kart. Oh dear. Nope. I think that's enough for me. But that is... Again, it's not a perfect conversion, and it's got plenty of issues of its own, but it's just much more visually appealing, it's much more entertaining. So, yeah, again, testimony that commercial programmers did not always put in as much effort as they could have done, but we all knew that. We all knew that. So there it is, the Commodore 16. A computer I still have tremendous nostalgia for, and which had many good games for it, even if sometimes the best ones required a little more searching than the bigger name games. But such is often the way. I'll include a link down below to plus4world.com. That's the main resource for everything Commodore 16, for anyone wanting to learn more about this family of machines. And, well, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Au revoir.